Watch your VC, Midge here, guy in a hat who loves to talk about records, and you can't have failed to notice that this week saw a major release from a major artist, and that was Paul McCartney's The Boys of Dungeon Lane, his latest solo album. It's been extensively covered in the VC. Everyone's been doing their own reviews and their own unboxings, and quite rightly so. But this week, for me, also saw another major release from another major artist that's not been talked about half as much as it should have been. And I'm hoping to set that straight a little bit on this video. And it's the latest release from the revered and featured electronic duo Boards of Canada. And this is their latest album after a very, very long wait, called Inferno. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about this. But I also wanted to talk a bit about Boards of Canada in general, in case, because there's obviously going to be people out here who've never heard of them, don't know what they're about, and don't know what they're missing out on, to be honest with you. So yeah, this is a big deal for me. It was a very big deal, almost as big a deal as a new Paul McCartney album. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on Boards of Canada if you're not aware of them. Now, Boards of Canada are a duo of brothers, Michael Sanderson and Marcus Owen from Scotland. And they spent a bit of time as kids in Canada because the dad was working over there. And they used to watch a lot of nature documentaries for kids made by the National Film Board of Canada, which is where they got the name from. Obviously, they moved back to Scotland and they make a very strange sort of retro futuristic type electronic music. And the reason why Boards of Canada are so featured, there's numerous reasons why, but it all stems from the first album they made back in '98 called Music Has the Right to Children. And as you can see from the cover, it's quite a sort of like a disturbing, degraded type of music. And unwittingly, I think they gave birth to the whole hauntology genre in the 90s. So basically, Boards of Canada make a synth-heavy type of electronica that's indebted to the past. And talking about hauntology, it's a very difficult genre to sort of pin down. But basically, it's a form of music that relies on imagined nostalgia, a bit eerie, a bit disturbing. So we're talking about things like, say, misremembered things from your youth. So, for people who grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, you're talking about things like public broadcast documentaries. You're talking about children's TV programs. You're talking about old logos and VHS idents and little sort of like company idents. Like, do you remember the famous Stephen J. Cannell ident at the end of A-Team episodes? So you're remembering little snippets of sort of like music or theme tunes, but it's sort of like misremembered. It's almost quite eerie, as in there's something not quite right about it. It's not how you remember it. Or maybe it is, because in a lot of ways, a lot of 70s TV programming for kids was quite disturbing. You didn't realise it at the time, but there's a lot of documentaries, a lot of programs made about how these programs wouldn't be made today because they're simply perhaps too real for kids or too eerie. And we all remember the public information films that were made that used to scare the hell out of us as kids.
Branch is weak, rotten. It'll never take his way.
It's that kind of disturbing nostalgia that Boards do so well. And no one else had done this sort of music up until this point before. And this was quite a big game changer in the electronic genre. And so basically, Boards of Canada makes synth heavy, very melodic, but they degrade the sound deliberately. So the sound is sort of like they use programs and machinery to sort of like make their instruments sound old or 70s type. So there's always like a bit of a fog or a bit of a mist surrounding the instrumentation on their records. Like I say, highly melodic. They make great use of samples, so it's usually samples from old TV shows, old documentaries, children's programming such as Sesame Street.
Oh, orange.
All mixed in a kind of sort of quite eerie type of a way, as you can tell from the cover with the missing faces. So it's like, you know, it's quite grainy. That is what the music sounds like. So it's very melodic, but very sort of off kilter at the same time. It's a bit like, you know, a bit uneasy. So they made this album in 1998 on the famous Warp label, the electronic label. This is the first press, I think. And you can tell because the Warp address is the old Sheffield address, my hometown. So basically, the Warp label wasn't just based there. There was the record shop there, and I've worked in it because it eventually became a FOP. And I used to shop at Warp Records as a kid. Used to have loads of different genres of music there, lots of imports. In fact, I remember buying NWA's notorious second album from there when it was initially banned in the UK, and it was illegal to sell it. I remember buying it under the counter from Warp, but that's another story. So yeah, based on the at the time Sheffield label, Warp, highly influential electronic label, this album was a bit of a game changer. And it was highly influential. Like I say, it used all sorts of manners of disturbing items from the past, commercials, sort of interviews, talking heads, but also they became notorious and highly revered for the fact that they used a lot of sort of Easter eggs in the music. And what I mean by that is they had a lot of hidden messages in the music, a lot of backwards messages, a lot of hidden samples, a lot of messages. And it became a sort of, not so much with this album, but the second album, Geogade, was themed around religion and different types of religion. So you could fall down a wormhole with that album on its own, because there's so many hidden messages and so many backwards messages, subliminal messages. And Boards of Canada's music is sort of centered around three themes, really. It's nature and science, you've got religion, and you've got maths. So, and the environment. So basically, you know, a lot of their music, although all of their music is instrumental apart from the vocal samples, it is based around those themes. So Boards of Canada have become like notorious for hiding things in the music, and that's why the fan base becomes so rabid when new material comes out. Nothing about Boards of Canada is accidental. The track titles, the samples in the songs are very obscure. People spend hours trying to track down the original sources. People play their records backwards, forwards, sideways to try and find the hidden messages. And there's so many wormholes you can fall down with Boards of Canada. And because they hardly ever give interviews, they've not played live since 2001. There's been like a mystique and an enigma that's been built up around the band, which has added to the legend. So that's why they're so featured and revered by the fans, because, you know, they are quite a mysterious act. So the last album, I'm not going to go through the whole discography because it would take too long, but the last album they made was in 2013, and it was this album, Tomorrow's Harvest. I absolutely love this cover. You can see the skyline sort of disappearing in the smog. So this was, again, it was an album that was themed around the environment. So basically this was probably a statement about where the planet's heading, and as it says, tomorrow's harvest, what exactly are we reaping for the future? So this was released in 2013. as the albums went on, there were longer and longer gaps between them, which again added to the enigma and the mystery. Would they ever make another one? So when this came out, there was a 13-year gap before the new one. So I got to the point where I thought they're never going to make another album now. They're not going to bother. And this, in a way, was a good sign-off because it was the sort of parting gift, if you like. It was themed around nature and the environment, and was this their final statement? You reap what you sow. What is tomorrow's harvest going to bring? So, yeah, 2013. So, 13 years later, all of a sudden, you get this album, the latest album, Inferno. And what are they trying to tell us this time around? I mean, nothing with Boards of Canada is accidental. So you get the impression that, daft as it sounds, they probably waited 13 years to make a statement because they're obsessed with maths and numbers. For example, nothing is accidental. Like I say, the catalogue number for this album, I don't know if you can see that there, is Warp 496. Now, this isn't following the sequential Warp label catalogue. So 496 is probably chosen, the theorising, is because it's a hexagonal number, which ties into their love of hexagonals and their hexagonal Sun studio. So again, all the track titles are very, very deliberately named. Like I say, there's websites and films and rabid fans everywhere who analyse Boards of Canada albums for the track titles, for the samples that they put in the music, to try and trace the original things. Because, as daft as it sounds, because they make instrumental music, they put so many messages in the music regarding themes that people track down the original sources because it adds to the music and it lets you know what they're thinking. But to be fair, they do make observations, particularly about religion, but they don't particularly make a stand. They're sort of like neutral, they're sort of like observers, if you like. So this album, Inferno, now is that a reference back to Tomorrow's Harvest? Are they saying that this is what we've reaped, this is hell, as it were? I can't help but thinking that the Inferno of the title refers to Dante's Inferno and the 9 circles of hell. So again, this album, people are already starting to analyse the tracks and the meanings behind them. And from my listening, I think it's sort of like a comment on today's, well, obviously they think it's going to be end times. So Inferno is a result of, what we've reaped, and it is, we're heading to hell, basically. So this is a much darker album than previous. And like I say, a 13-year wait. They dropped another one of their amazing marketing campaigns. Another thing Boards of Canada are known for is the absolutely spectacular marketing campaigns they do for their albums. I don't think any other band or artist has ever done anything like they have. For example, the last album, they dropped 12-inch records free in shops all over the world with codes on them. If you manage to get the 4 codes from the album and the videos, it unlocks certain sites. So this time around, they sent out VHS tapes with hexagons on them to fans with a video, which with certain sorts of clips of images and stuff, which people have been analysing, all in the build-up to bringing this album out. The marketing campaigns for their albums are superb. And here we are. Here's Inferno. So basically, part of the build-up of the promotion for this album was there were some listening parties around the world, all held in churches, very difficult to get tickets in the major European cities. But there were also some listening parties in local record shops in the UK and around the world. I went to one at my local record shop, Bear Tree Records, and it was really cool. It was a night one because they obviously wanted to sell the album once it got to midnight. So I went along to Bear Tree Records for a late listening party, the hours before it was officially released, and it was really cool. They'd turned all the lights down in the shop, so that added to it as well. So, you got to listen to the album for the first time in near semi-darkness. You could really concentrate on the music. also, they gave away promotional packs as well, which was really cool. Again, very enigmatic. So each participant who had got a ticket was given this brown folder. Within, you got the promotional items. You got a hexagon keyring. You got a patch with the nuclear family on it, which is another one of Boards of Canada's idents. A sticker. And this really cool poster. So that's really cool. I'm a sucker for promotional items, you know that. So yeah, listening party, really enjoyed it, and you could buy this album at the end of the session, and someone gave me a bit of a nod and said you need to go for the deluxe edition, which is expensive, but because I'm a Boards of Canada freak, I did go for it, and there's a reason why people gave the nod to go for the deluxe, and I'll show you why in a minute. So basically, all the artwork is done by Boards of Canada themselves. So again, you've got the sort of grainy, sort of quite disturbing mixture of old and new. Triple fold out sleeve. Obviously, you've got the references to religion. It comes on red vinyl. Inferno red vinyl. This was a Bear Tree Records exclusive, so it had a print that you got with the album, stamped and signed, so that was pretty cool. Also, the album came with this very nicely printed booklet, again with images done by the band. Again, that mixture of old and new and sort of deliberately degraded images. Quite disturbing in parts, again. And also, the bonus was a hexagonal shaped picture disc, which is exclusive to the deluxe edition. Apparently, record shops were told not to unbox the records, to not give away the secret that was in it until the album was released. So that's pretty cool. So, the new album, what's it like? Was it worth the wait? I'll be honest, I absolutely love it. I've been obsessively listening to it this week, as I tend to do with Boards of Canada, because I love Boards of Canada and I love their albums, and it's been a long wait for this one. I never thought they would bring out another album. It's difficult to get a feel for it at first, but a friend of mine who heard it the day before the release, I said to him, "What is it like? Is it good? Was it worth the wait?" And he summed it up quite well, because he said it's like a mixture of everything that's gone before, and it is. It's sort of like a mixture of sort of degraded melodies of the first album. It's got the religious heavy imagery of the second album. It's got the sort of like the processed guitar sounds, which are more prominent, like it was on the Campfire Head phase, the third album. And sort of like some of the themes of Tomorrow's Harvest as well. So it is a mixture. It's a mixture. They brought back a lot of the vocal samples, which was sort of missing on the last couple of albums. The only thing about the sound is very, very bold and sort of bright on this album. The sort of degrading of the sound isn't as prominent as it was. This is very sort of upfront and in your face. It's sort of quite brash, and it's quite clear. The vocal samples in particular, which used to be deliberately hidden in the mix, are more prominent this time. And it does seem to be an album that has returned to the themes of the second album, Geogarde. And it's primarily, it seems to be focused on religion again. So you've got loads of tracks with sort of snippets of TV evangelists. You've got speeches from overdubs of speeches from Aleister Crowley. You've got snippets from drug documentaries and things. So it's your typical Board of Canada, but it does seem to be quite heavily centred around religion again this time. You've got things like Prophecy at 1420 megahertz, which was the first single. Again, it goes back to their love of maths and science. So apparently 1420 megahertz is the signal band that's reserved for extraterrestrial communications. It's deliberately left clear. But in 1977 there was a brief signal or a transmission that they detected that they never managed to translate. So yeah, again, the themes of maths and science are heavily featured again. It's obviously an obsession with the band. You've got references to religion. You've got the Age of Capricorn, which again, if you look into it, is the religious time that follows the Age of Aquarius. Father and Son is a standout track, really eerie track, which has some vocal samples which are really cleverly cut up and sort of made into almost like a song. They're pitched high and low, and they've already tracked down the source of that, and apparently it was a documentary where a father whose son has run away to a religious cult is saying, "Please come home, why can't you come home?" And the lad says, "I can't come home. In the Bible it says that the people you must trust the least are your friends and your family." And it's sort of like a debate between the two about coming home and who he loves most. He loves the Lord and he can't leave. And so like it's very heavily, I mean, Boards of Canada never make any sort of judgments about this. They're sort of presented to you and you make the decisions. They're sort of like observers, if you like, but the religious imagery on this album is quite thick. Obviously it ties into the Inferno of the title. So yeah, and also I know I'm talking about all this sort of like hidden meanings and all this sort of stuff, but I'm supposed the question you're asking is, can I enjoy Boards of Canada at face value? And you totally can. The wormholes are there if you want to get into it, but you don't have to follow me. You don't have to fall down. You can listen to Boards of Canada at face value. The melodies are still there, very beautiful, very moving. Obviously this album is a lot darker than previous, but it's still, it's not a difficult listen as such. It's quite an eerie listen at times and a disturbing listen, but it's not hard music. It's not music that you will struggle to enjoy. The melody is always there. For example, there's a track on it, it's absolutely beautiful. You Retreat in Time and Space, which is an absolutely beautiful melancholic instrumental song, absolutely beautiful. And Boards of Canada nail beautiful a lot, and just really drifting, really nostalgic sort of, really sort of brings feelings. It's very hard to, as you can hear, it's very hard to describe, but it brings sort of like a really nostalgic, really sort of, I can't describe it. I can't do it. But basically, it's very moving music at times. It does bring that feeling of nostalgia and days gone by, and times and events in your life that have gone by that you remember in a certain way or shape or form. And this at times it's really eerie, at times it's really beautiful. But like I say, it's a lot bigger sound than previous. It's a lot more direct and in your face. Like I say, there's people now on the internet going through all these track titles, going through all these songs, trying to find the sources, trying to find the messages or the meanings behind the track, and that's part of the fun of listening to Boards of Canada. But you can listen to them at face value as well. So I'll probably wrap it up there because I think I'm starting to talk absolute nonsense. But yeah, absolutely loving this. I think it's a really strong album. It doesn't disappoint. Well, it doesn't disappoint me anyway. It's great to see them back. I don't think they'll make another record, but I've said that before. But yeah, major release of the year. It hasn't disappointed me. Every listen you gain something from it. Highly recommend it. Check it out, as well as a new Paul McCartney album. If you've never tried Boards before, they're well worth dipping into. There's a brilliant world of music awaiting you, and I'm going to leave it now because I'm becoming more sort of inarticulate than I normally am. But yeah, just as important as Paul McCartney in my eyes. Boards of Canada, Inferno, check it out, great album.